What's up, vapors? Thanks for checking out Daily Vape TV. My name is Nick, and it's Fresh Build Friday. That's right, it's that time of the week again, where we get you ready for the weekend with a brand new coil build. Alright guys, welcome to Vape School 101, Episode 3. Today we're going to be covering wicking, and more wicking. I get a lot of questions from you guys in the comment section of my Fresh Build Friday videos all about my wicking technique. Now, personally, I just feel like it's mundane and boring. I've been doing it for so long. I just speed through the whole process and get it over with, but a lot of you guys out there might be struggling with certain techniques on certain devices, so today, hopefully we will be able to teach you guys some tips and tricks. So I've got two different devices that we're going to be wicking up today. We've got an RTA and an RDA. Obviously, there's a million different styles and types of devices out there, and we can't wick them all in this video, but this should give you a head start on applying these techniques to whatever you're building on. So let's go ahead and get started here, but before we do, I do have to give a massive shout out to Native Wicks Cotton. They send me cotton to use in my Fresh Build Friday videos, so I just have to show some love for them. I really do appreciate everything that they've given me, and I also tend to give away their little sample packs with my giveaways as well, so thank you so much, Native Wicks, for that. If you guys want to pick some up for yourself, I'll leave a link right down there in the description below. But without further ado, let's grab our wire, our wick, our tools, our addy, our juice, all that good stuff. Let's go down to the close-up view and build it up. Alright guys, so as you can see, we've got everything here to follow along with today's video. I'm going to be using all of the tools from the Coilmaster DIY Mini V2 kit that they sent me. Very, very good little handy piece of kit there. We have a pair of scissors. Obviously, you need something to trim off your excess cotton with. I like using these ceramic tweezers for a lot of situations because they're a little bit more blunt tipped and they don't tend to rip the cotton as much as these guys right here. These are the curved tooth little tweezers, and they tend to grab onto that cotton a little bit better, but it's also good to tuck it into those little tight spaces. We of course have our cotton. Today I'm going to be using this stuff right here. Native Wicks, they sponsor my close-up portions of these Fresh Build Friday / Vape School 101 videos. So got to give them a lot of credit there. Thank you so much, Native Wicks, for allowing me to have some cotton to use. Then we also have our decks. We have this Kensai here that we're going to be wicking on. I have a lot of questions about this guy here, and I figured this would be a good kind of all-around general RTA to wick. Then we also have this Pulse 24, just kind of a generic dripper wicking tutorial for the latter half of this video. Alright guys, we're going to start it off with the Kensai RTA here, and I get a lot of questions about RTA wicking. You know, it sometimes can be a little bit tricky to get the right amount of cotton through the coils and to have not too much but not too little at the same time. I mean, it's just that kind of fine line where you want to just get that just the perfect amount of cotton. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let's go and take a crack at this one. Let's go grab our piece of cotton. So I'm just going to open up the bag of Native Wicks here, pull out some cotton. You need about an inch to an inch and a half. I know it's a little bit much, but you don't want to cut off a strip that's not quite enough and then be kind of screwed. So cut off a little strip about an inch and a half in length or so, and this is all you'll need. So you want to just kind of feel it out. You want to kind of look at the cotton top down and just kind of gauge how thick you want it to be. And you're going to start big and go smaller. So just kind of rip off whatever you think is a little bit too much and just kind of start feeling it out there. Usually what I'll do is kind of peel away the first little layer here on the outside of the end that's going through the coils. So just see me kind of pick at that, just get rid of any loose little hairs on the edge. And that usually helps me out a lot later on down the road. So just kind of feel it out, kind of roll it a little bit between your fingers. And right now, this to me feels like too much wicking for a 3mm coil. So what I'm going to do is take just the tiniest little pinch and just peel it off. So just a little tiny pinch there. That's all I took off, that little thread right there. So not that much. And then you're going to basically kind of repeat that process until it feels about right. And just kind of feel it a little bit between your fingers before you try to even attempt to stick it through the coil, just to kind of gauge whether or not it's going to fit or not. And this is going to be one of those things that requires a lot of practice. You're going to have to just do a few dozen times wicking on an RTA to actually get it right. So don't be, disillusioned if you don't get it right the first time. So right there, trying to put it through the coil, it's just not even wanting to try at all. So I'm going to basically unroll it a little bit and just peel off another little strand, just like that. And I know a lot of you guys say I waste cotton, which I do. I am not going to lie, I waste a lot of cotton, but I'd rather waste a tiny bit of cotton just to get it right rather than just kind of stick some cotton through there and just have it really mess up on me. So right now it's going through the coils, and I usually will twist as I'm kind of pushing through the coil, but as you probably can tell here, it doesn't quite want to go. It really doesn't want to go. It's kind of binding up, so I'm going to take it out and try it again there. Again, unroll it a little bit, just kind of straighten it back out, just take another little strand, a little hair, kind of do the same thing. Just a little tiny bit at a time. You don't want to go too much because then you're going to have to start all over again, and that's no fun. So just make sure if you have like these little loose ends towards the beginning there, usually what I'll do is I'll just take my scissors and snip them, because I like to have a nice neat tip for sticking it through the coil. It usually helps me out. So basically just taking the tiniest little pinch here, first maybe 1/4 of an inch or so, and just kind of pinching and rolling it, getting it nice and compressed, and that goes right through the coil. Once you can grab it from the other side, you're going to start pulling. And usually what I'll do if it's really tight cotton, I'll take each end and twist as I pull it through, and then untwist. So just let it hang there. So if it's really tight, you could twist it in the opposite directions on either side of the coil and then let it go as you pull it through. And right now it is very much tight, but it's actually appropriate for this coil here. This coil is a fairly low resistance. It's a 0.11 ohm build, so you want that cotton pretty good and tight. So tight to the point that you feel like you're going to actually move the coil if you continue to pull anymore. So it's a fair amount of tension inside that wire. You can actually pick up your whole RDA just by, the cotton tail here, and it's not going to really move around. So that's how tight I like my cotton. Again, this is something that's going to take a lot of practice. Practice, 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 practice. You will eventually get it down. So once you get that side, the second step is just doing it again for the other coil. So right now I'm kind of in a bit of a situation here where I have not enough cotton left. I took off a little bit too much, and now I can kind of easily just pull this strand all the way through, and I'm not really happy with the tension that I get. So now I have to start all over again. It's a very, very fine line here, guys. I'm telling you, it's going to take a lot of practice, and you're going to screw up a couple of times. I mean, even now, I can still screw up every now and then, but eventually you will get it down, and then it's just like second nature. You can just kind of feel it between your fingers and know that it's not going to fit in a particular coil, and just kind of gauge what size coil versus the amount of cotton is right, so that way you don't cut off too much or too little. So right there, I feel like that's pretty good. And we're just going to back off our cotton ever so slightly. So after you pull it through, you want to just pull it the opposite direction, just real gently, so that it puffs up on both sides here. You can probably tell that both sides of this wick are nice and puffy and fluffy and light. They have some air going into them, which is good. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to actually trim off some of the excess cotton here. And basically I'm just going to kind of lay it down over the side of my RTA. Just kind of lay it down like that and just judge where the cotton, you want that cotton to sit, and then just kind of chomp off the majority of it. So kind of like that right about there. I know that's probably not quite enough, so that's actually a good thing. You don't want to cut off too much. So just kind of bend it down, gauge it, and do a big trim. So there you go. So that's the first initial trimming. I usually go through about 2 or 3 stages here, depending on how complex it is. But next stage I'm going to do is actually just thinning out this wick, and this helps especially with RTAs with these smaller wicking holes. Like I know the Bravo has a little bit smaller of a diameter, and I like a lot of fluffy cotton, so getting these big fluffy tails down into these smaller diameter wicking holes there is a bit of a chore. So just thinning them out ever so slightly like this here, just kind of raking your cotton with these tweezers, is definitely going to help you guys out a lot. And it also gets rid of some of the loose fibers. fibers. So if you have a few little loose fibers just kind of hanging on to the outside of these wick tails here, it's actually going to get rid of them. And you want to kind of fluff in all directions. You want to fluff up a little bit, you want to fluff down a little bit, side to side, all different directions, just to kind of hit every little surface area on this. And as you can see here, it just really puffs it out quite a bit. So there we go. Looking pretty good right now. I know this is a lot of cotton to actually get rid of, but it will be good. I'm telling you guys, this is how I've been doing it for a very long time, and it works out really well for me. So now I'm just going to kind of chop it off right where I initially did, just to kind of neaten it up, basically. I mean, you don't necessarily have to. You can just kind of do a little basic trimming here, or you can even pull off some of those loose fibers, but I tend to just give it a proper trimming because it looks nicer and it's a lot neater. So just kind of cut it like that. I kind of sort of cut it at an angle too. Basically with my RTAs, sometimes I'll actually cut at a 45-degree angle here, just to get rid of some of the stuff, the bulk that's on the bottom. I don't know, I just started doing it one day and it made sense and it worked, so I've just kind of continued doing that. But obviously you guys are going to develop your own style and you're going to develop your own techniques, and you know, not everybody does it the same, which is totally fine. I've always said, you know, as long as it works, as long as it works, it's okay in my book. This is where these little curved tweezers come into play. This is the step that I really like using these curved tweezers, because you can pinch them together and then just kind of separate off your wicks and just tuck it in. So just kind of tuck it in one wick at a time here. Just be gentle about it. You want to lift up on the wick to get it into that little wicking port there, whatever you want to call it. I'm not really sure what if there's even a proper name for it, but the little wicking port at the bottom of the kensai here, you just want to kind of lift up and tuck your wick tails into it instead of just kind of jamming it in. So right now, this is what it looks like, and it's fairly neat, but we're going to neaten it up a little bit more. So same thing on the other side here, just kind of lift and tuck gently. You don't want to mash up the cotton too much, because then it just gets to be a big old mess, and it makes it harder to actually clean up a messy bit of cotton there. So just kind of tuck it, keep tucking until all of that cotton is locked into place there. Get any loose little stragglers and stuff like that, you want to just give it a tuck as well. And we're looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. So this side obviously is a little bit messier. We've got a little bit of spillage here, a little overspill. So what we're going to do is take our scissors and just kind of run it along the edge, get as close to that little hole as possible, and trim. So just basically get in there with your scissors and trim off any little loose ends that might be hanging out outside the hole, because those are going to catch on threads, and that can be a whole other nightmare as well. So just kind of catch any little loose pieces there. Give it a little puff of air just to get rid of those tiny little baby fibers. Be careful not to trim the bulk of the wick. Obviously that can be a factor here as well, but you want to really just be gentle with it and just be careful. And as you could probably tell, I like my wicks good and fluffy. There's a lot of cotton on these outside edges here, but it's touching all of that surface area. Since we raked all the cotton through both sides, it touches every little bit of wire inside the coil, and that's going to, you know, prevent any sort of major hot spots, which is great. And it's worked. You know, I'm telling you guys, this system, this way, has worked for me. A lot of people tend to either overwick or underwick on RTA, but you know, it just takes that little bit of concentration and patience, and you know, just a steady hand when you're trimming and everything like that. And you can get really OCD with the trimming part of it. I mean, some people will actually go and take their wicks out again and trim it and then put them back in. But this system is a little bit quicker, and it just works for me. So there we go. So the last thing I do before I put the tank back together is I actually saturate the entirety of the wicks, and that way I can test it out before I set it back up again, just to make sure it's firing. And usually after I saturate every little bit of the cotton here, I'll just give it a quick test fire to just give it a smell test, really. I call it the smell test because I'm smelling for any metallic smells. Like usually if you smell a heavy, like metallic kind of scent to it, it means that you have a hot spot, and that means it's not going to work very well. So just be on the lookout for that. You know, obviously you want to saturate every little possible inch of your cotton here before you fire up your coils. You want to give it a good soaking, and that way you're not going to just instantly burn the cotton that you took that much time to prepare. So let's just go ahead and get all that surface area. We'll turn on our ohm reader here and give it a quick little fire. And you just want to smell for any sort of metallic smell. If it smells like burning canthal, then you definitely need to fix something in there. You have to just rip those wicks out and start all over again. Make sure you go back and watch my coil tuning process for tips on that. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as wicking and RTA is concerned. Pretty simple. All right, guys, so now on to the RDA. Really, I just wick all of my RDAs pretty much the same. I have this Pulse 24 here just because it's a nice open deck and you can see exactly what's going on. And yeah, I mean, it's just pretty much the same process, just different post style when it comes to wicking on any particular RDA. And there's nothing really special about it. I'll be honest with you guys. This process is a hell of a lot easier than wicking an RTA because you don't have to worry about leaking or anything like that. The only thing you have to be really concerned about when it comes to an RDA is make sure it doesn't dry hit and you make sure you have just enough cotton in there. So once again, we start with about 1.5 inch piece of our Native Wicks cotton. And I'm just going to separate off my first piece here and feel it out, and I can already tell you it's going to be too much, so I'm just going to take that little piece off right there. And once again, just kind of roll it between your fingers, start the rolling process right near the tip that you're going to actually go through the coil. You're going to put through that coil there, and if you have any little outlying parts that stick out, like you can see that it's just not quite even there, we're just going to trim them off. So just kind of go snip like that, and again, just kind of roll it through your fingers. I can already tell you guys that it's going to be a little bit too tight, so unroll it. Take a little tiny bit off, like that, and then do the same process again. And as I'm doing that, I'm also kind of grooming it a little bit, just taking off any little excess strands here and there. Sometimes you get those pieces that just don't quite mesh in with the rest of it, so just kind of trim those off with your fingers there. Tighten down this little nub tip there just to a nice pinpoint, and that way it goes right through the coil. Basically, I'm doing the length of the coil, the actual size or width of the coil rather. That's the part that I'm, over tightening. So you just really want to crank hard on that and put it through the coil. Hopefully it fits properly. If it gives you any resistance, then take it out and do it again. Just kind of, see, once again, we have this little tip that doesn't want to behave on us and it's folding over on itself. So I'm just going to snip that off and go ahead and go for it once again. There we go. So it goes right through the coil. Then you start pulling it through. And once it gets really tight, once your coil starts moving around a little bit, you can pinch both sides, roll it either direction there, an opposite direction on either side there, and then unroll when you get it to the position that you're happy with. That usually helps get that cotton real good and tight inside the actual coil, so it makes sure it makes it touch every single bit of wire on the inside of the surface area of the inner diameter of the coil, and that way you get no hot spots. So that's really good. So as you can probably see here, the coil's moving around a little bit when we touch our cotton, which is exactly what I want, and we're going to do that again for the second coil. All right, so now that we have both pieces of cotton through our coils here, we're just going to start with a initial trimming. And with this one here, I tend not to measure the first time, just kind of trim off any obvious ends that are going to be way too long. So just kind of hack it off there. And again on the other side, chop. And we begin our fluffing process. So once again, just kind of rake it through the coil, just like that, just gently at first. And then fluff it up, fluff it all different directions. You can really tease them out if you want to with this RDA here because it doesn't really matter. You're just going to tuck it into the juice well anyways. So really tease them out, get them nice and fluffy. The fluffier the better. That's my motto when it comes to wicking. Fluffy cotton. I've said that since day one of Fresh Build Friday. So just fluff them out like that. You don't really want a whole heck of a lot of pressure there as well. You just kind of want to gently just kind of wisp your tweezers through that cotton. That way it doesn't grab it, hold, and rip that cotton all the way through the other side. Just kind of lightly fluff them up. It's kind of like, think of Bob Ross when you're doing this, because it's kind of like how he paints. Very light, very airy, a lot of just no pressure sort of strokes, and just kind of wisp that cotton, make it really nice and fluffy like that. And then before you know it, you'll be a master at wicking. So just fluff them up really nice and good there. Just tons of cotton flying everywhere, those little tiny bits, but that's okay. When you have it to where you're happy, right about there, you're just going to go ahead and take your scissors again. And now I'd kind of cut into it a little bit more, just because I like those edges nice and straight. Those ends of the cotton I like nice and straight and even. And I'll even go in and give it a proper little haircut here on the bottom, just kind of do extra attention. This is totally unnecessary. I usually go above and beyond when it comes to wicking, but a buddy of mine, Jake, from back in the day, he taught me how to wick way back, and he taught me the importance of wicking. That was really the key factor. And I really didn't believe him at first. I'm like, just shove cotton through it and you're good to go. He's like, no, dude, you really need to pay attention to your cotton, because it can tell you a lot of things, and it's true. If it's too tight, it'll be really dry towards the inside of the coil. If it's too loose, you'll see light through the coil itself. And I really had some bad days back then, and I wouldn't have nearly enough cotton in my coils. And finally, I was just practicing and practicing and practicing, and I ended up getting it. And yeah, I mean, to this day, I practice this exact same method. I've been doing it no different for years, just picking up little tricks along the way to just further improve my situation here. But that's pretty much it. As you can see here, nice fluffy big wicks, as you can see there, just big old wick tails at the end. And this is still probably a little bit much, so I might have to trim a little bit more off, but let's just see. Let's just take a look here, see what we can do. One good thing about the Pulse 24 is it has a nice deep juice well. Actually, you know what? I think that's pretty good. I think that length is pretty decent. You want it just barely touching the actual juice well the bottom of the juice well. You want it just barely touching that, because any excess cotton is going to be completely pointless. So just barely tuck it in and make it touch the bottom there. And if you have obviously too much, then just take it back out again and give it a little trim. No big deal. No harm, no foul. But you absolutely don't want to do the whole big fluffy cloud of cotton underneath your coil, and you really don't want to touch the cotton to the underside of the coil, because then it's just going to boil off the juice instead of actually vaporizing it properly. So, I mean, what you learned back in the day was very, very wrong. I think we all learned the wrong way to wick with cotton first, and then new techniques were developed and came out that were the right way to wick. But you got to start somewhere. I think we've all made plenty of mistakes, whether it be with wicking or coil building and everything else in between. So really, there's no reason to judge people based on how they build or how they wick. You just want to keep it good and fluffy in the juice well as well here. You just want to kind of keep it good and separated from your coil. You don't want it bound up too much. You don't want it teased out too much. And at the end of the day, it should look something along the lines of this here. Obviously, you can see that there's no cotton whatsoever floating underneath those coils, and everything is tucked nicely into the juice wells on the side there, which is great. And I think that's a pretty good looking wick job there. So next thing we're going to do is juice it up. So just like the RTA, we're just going to give it a little bit of juice on the top here. Just kind of flood those coils with a lot of liquid. Just dump that juice on. I mean, you don't want to really pour juice everywhere, but just make sure it lands on the coils and on the cotton, just to test out whether or not we have any remaining hot spots. This is basically your last chance before you start vaping to find out if you have hot spots, so you might as well give it a shot here. So first things first, heat them up, give it a little smell test, And as long as it smells just like the flavor that you put on there, you're good to go. All you got to do is just pop your cap on and start vaping. Alright guys, I hope you found this video to be educational and you picked up a few new tips and tricks along the way. I've been doing this wicking style forever, basically just updating it every now and then when I find a new helpful trick or something like that where I could save a little bit of time or hassle and make my life a little bit easier. But right now I'm rocking the Kensai that we just wicked up at 100 watts with no dry hits. I swear this technique absolutely works, guys. Just practice, 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 and eventually you'll be a wicking master. So next week's video is going to be all about basic Claptoning techniques. I'm going to teach you how to make the basic Clapton coil, and hopefully you guys will be able to apply them to some of the more exotic builds as well. But that about does it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like this. Don't forget to click that notification bell right next to the subscribe button if you want to be alerted whenever I upload videos. Also, leave me some comments in the box below. I'd love to hear your thoughts all about my tips and tricks in this video. If you found it useful, then let me know right down there in the comments box. Also, check out the advocacy and my social media links right down there in the description below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and as always, vape on.